I think the industry should consider itself on notice. We wanted you to clean up your house, you didn't.
Yep.
Now we're going to put something in place. If that can't work, they're not going to say, well, we did our best and forget about it. And that will make it difficult and more expensive for everyone to operate. So now is the time to say, do you know what? We actually are going to pull together as one, as an industry that is not going to be self-interested, is going to provide absolute transparency, and is going to work for the contractor. So regardless of what your view is on any of that sort of stuff, it's now time to come together and say, how do we make this work and kick the bad actors out?
Hi, and welcome back to Orcapods. It is lovely to be back after a short mid-season break, and I'm delighted to welcome who for me is a legend, that's certainly in our industry, which is Tom Wallace, Director of WTT. Tom, welcome to Orcapods.
Thank you for the invite, Rob.
No worries. We have got the glorious topic today of the budget. Well, I say the budget, but how the budget is going to sort of impact those of us that recruit in the temporary labour market, obviously umbrella companies and sort of supply chains in and around that, if that's all right.
That's what I'm here for.
Naturally, I guess there might be some, your expertise and mine is very, very different. So if there's anything that you feel is relevant to bring in, I may have missed, please feel free to do that. So do you want to just give everyone a bit of background? I don't need it. Lots of people don't, but most people will know who you are, but just some background on you.
It's very, very, very flattering intro, Rob, but I'm sure lots of people will say, who is that? So for the benefit of everyone, as you said, Director of WTT being a professional services firm who particularly specialise in the contingent labour market, recruitment sector. It's a law firm, tax firm, legal firm. Tax is my part of that. So I've been doing tax for probably more years than I care to admit on camera. I've done 20 years at HMRC before leaving and joining WTT. And I've been leading their tax disputes department and the advisory work in general for the last 7 years.
So you know your shit, basically.
Let's find out.
Yeah, fair. Well, I don't doubt that for 1 second. Okay, so the budget, I think, look, for us, and obviously when we spoke prior to you coming on, I sort of looked at 4 key areas that I think have probably got the biggest impact on anyone who's engaged in temporary labour. So if you're comfortable, we'll sort of break that down. The big one is obviously going to come at the end, which was the announcement of the non-compliance with umbrella companies and what Labour's plans are to obviously tackle that going forward. So we'll sort of keep that part to the end or to as the last discussion topic. So I guess the sort of the employer's NI element was the biggest. Well, I think it's fair. They leaked, didn't they, the employer's NI?
Yeah, I mean, as most things, the budget is quite heavily trailed these days. When I was in HMRC and I was involved in some budget measures, developing them, putting them forward, it was actually very closely guarded secret. Even you weren't allowed to know until it was announced in the House of Commons. So literally you're sitting there waiting.
As HMRC, sorry.
Okay. As someone who's input into that policy, as someone sort of said, this is what we want to take forward, you're sitting there waiting and going, are we going to get it in the budget? Is it going to be announced? Now it's like, well, it's in the newspapers before. Now, clearly that's the headline. There's lots of other bits that goes on that it almost doesn't even get announced in the House. You have to find it in the policy papers afterwards. But it does seem to be a trend that we kind of know what the budget is before we get to budget day these days.
Yeah, because actually, I mean, there was obviously parts in there that weren't leaked and stuff. But you're right, the key components. Mind you, we say that, but then, and I'm not just trying to quickly gloss over, but I suppose they're aligned. No one saw the employer's NI threshold decrease coming, did they?
No, there's always something that comes a little bit left field, and we probably thought it was probably going to be more tinkering with the rates a bit more. perhaps levies, that sort of stuff. To see such a drastic cut, what we had, which let's not gloss over it and put numbers around it. Let's just say it's basically slashed it in half.
Yeah, agreed.
Basically.
Yep.
So to do that, and yes, it has a particular impact on the contingent labour market because of the way it operates. But for any business, instantly, I mean, I'll tell you now, our business, we were sitting there watching it and was instantly doing the calculations, like what does that cost in reality? Because it's an impact. It's literally, for some businesses, it's the difference between going, we're going to recruit someone this year and we're not going to recruit someone this year.
And I've already seen redundancies as a result of it this week. I saw actually a post on LinkedIn from an entrepreneur who, I can't remember exactly what field he was in, but he said that with the employer NI increase, and just for the record, that's gone from 13, or will go from 13.8% to 15. So it's a 1.2% increase, isn't it? The employer's NI threshold, you now start paying tax at 5,000. Yes. That's right, isn't it? So for him, for his existing workforce, it was going to increase that by £1.5 million. As a result of that, now, and we're talking about now, just before basically we're coming to the Christmas period, he's had to release 125 people.
Yeah, that's devastating for those people. Absolutely devastating for him, I'm sure, having to make those decisions. No one wants to have to make those decisions, but that's the reality of this budget.
And is it simple? Because look, one of the reasons, obviously, your expertise is obviously the primary reason here, but in my head there's questions that I want to ask you to say, is it simply just a case of, unfortunately, it is just the raw economics, or was there anything else in the budget that maybe offsets the wrong word? The employers or the employment allowance, I know, went up double. A lot of media commentators were saying that was to obviously soften the blow of the employer's NI decrease. Is it just simple economics, though, or is there anything else that the budget for businesses that don't want to obviously have to make redundancies, let alone obviously from a growth standpoint potentially being on hold? Or is it just the simplicity of, unfortunately, the calculations are that simple? Can you afford to keep employing your current staff? Can you afford to grow? Or was there sort of other areas that may help offset that at all?
I have to be honest, it wasn't a business-friendly budget. So a lot of the time you'll look at budgets or statements, because effectively we have two budgets these days. We have two. This was one where you looked at it and you said, well, actually, whilst there is some little slivers in there, employment allowance softens the blow a little bit for some businesses. But ultimately, it's not like it was like we've slashed corporation tax, or we've taken, we've given a new allowance that you can invest in infrastructure and that sort of stuff. There was some extensions of current allowances, but the reality is, in an environment where taxes are going up, it's very hard to kind of justify investing in your business over ensuring that your staff are going to have a paycheck.
Yeah. Look, I've seen the media don't help this, but this Armageddon narrative, and it's going to smash our industry to pieces. And, I don't want to be the harbinger of doom, so I'm going to steer clear of sort of that narrative. But it's already having an impact. I mean, this week I got sent 7 people from the umbrella industry. And these were by friends, by the way. It's not by recruitment consultants, or I've had personal messages sent to me on LinkedIn. So that impact is already being felt. And these changes don't come until April, do they?
Yeah, April.
So is that, you don't have a crystal ball, but I think, I'm quite worried about that.
There's a lot of people do think I have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
If I did, lottery numbers would be the first thing I'd be searching for. Look, the reality is, the budget happens, you have an instant reaction, you take stock, and then you go, okay, what does that mean? Because we do have this kind of gap up to April, as you say, before it kind of kicks in. And some businesses will decide to divert funds from perhaps marketing, business development, that sort of thing, to keep staff. Some businesses will decide that we can't divert any funds from that, and reality is we have to lose staff. And some businesses will try and just trade their way out of it. They'll just try and just keep the cash flow going and see if we could just build up a bit of business there. And none of those are the right answer. Like, there's not a wrong answer and there's not a right answer. I think the problem with the industry, the recruitment industry, is it's the fine margins that everyone operates on.
Yeah.
So where you're only, taking, look, I don't want to put numbers around it, but you're not taking hundreds of pounds around each payment that comes through an umbrella, for instance, or comes through an agency. So quite a percentage of that, what you are taking. So you either have to increase your fees, or you have to basically say we're going to take the hit somewhere else,
which is reducing headcount.
Yeah. So, or the third option, where you cut corners.
Yeah, do you know what? And I think that probably leads us, because we didn't the national living wage or the minimum wage increase as well, which is almost, I say, the vulgar cherry on the cake, because.
Well, it is, but it's quite important when you look at the recruitment industry, because if you look, say you are, it's quite easy for us to look at perhaps business analysts contracting, perhaps IT programmers, professionals contracting, who are on a daily wage, which is not going to be, yes, it's going to be impacted. But when you look at the lower end of the temporary labour market, when you look at the hospitality sector and that sort of stuff, where people are operating at or around minimum wage, well, actually, there is a situation here where if the agency is not now billing the end client a higher amount, then ultimately you take the additional employer's national insurance out of the pay, and that person could become below national minimum wage.
We've already started having conversations with some of our clients on exactly that, and I say forecasting, but it sort of marries up to what you were saying. It's actually planning properly. I think this is, and there'll be a lot of, when we talk about the large, bigger, certainly for me per se, and Orca and other umbrella companies. But I think this is quite paramount specifically for temporary labour, is how is that being passed? There's almost, and with the non-compliance announcement and what they're going to be doing from 2026, there's almost, I don't know, I see it as, is it a re-education? Is it a rebalance? I don't know whether the terminology may be correct on that. But for years and years, the assignment rate and pay rate has been problematic. Yeah. As umbrella companies, still now, it's the biggest issue that we deal with. And I'm not trying to be a dickhead here or throw anyone under the bus, but a recruitment agency will say, Tom, your pay rate is £15 an hour, let's say, for ease of numbers. What they're actually saying is that your assignment rate is £15 an hour. You then get paid by Orca. We pay there is an assignment rate of £15 passed to us. Once the employment costs that legally have to be deducted are deducted, your pay rate isn't £15. And you're quite right, is what is now going to happen in terms of those lower end workers who will naturally, with the national living wage or minimum wage increase, the employers' NI changes, will go below national minimum wage, which they will. Yep. They fundamentally and categorically will. The agency is going to have to go back to that client and say, I'm really sorry, WTT, but you need to give me an extra £5 an hour, again for ease of numbers, to cover the employment costs and thus to ensure that Tom is not paid below national minimum wage. That in its own right presents quite substantial problems, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's problematic. Contractually, where do you stand in that? Ultimately, you're obligated to pay national minimum wage. This isn't.
Well, it's an offence not to do so.
It's not an option.
Yeah,
it's not an option. So, it's got to come out of someone's pocket. Is what I'm saying. If the end client, and look, I think in a lot of situations, when you're looking at this sector and the levels you're working at, yes, the end client probably will recognise that, yes, okay, the rate we pay is going to have to be higher to cover that. But again, the hospitality sector has its own problems. They've got their own issues with margins and profitability and all of that sort of stuff. So it all just it compounds to almost, I don't want to say a perfect storm, but it does come back to, if you want to remain compliant, there's a cost.
Do you think that this steers a lot more to unsavoury, non-compliant routes?
I think it tempts. I think it's a temptation. And I think, having seen what I've seen from the opposite side, so a lot of my work has been helping people who have been caught in non-compliant structures, umbrellas, loan schemes, whatever you want to badge them as. What they are not is umbrellas, those schemes. They are contrived arrangements to, A, make a lot of money for the people promoting them and who are facilitating them, and B, allege that they give a higher take home to the worker. Now, that allege is pretty big there. But can you imagine now, if you're a worker who's at or around minimum wage, perhaps been squeezed a little bit more at the margins because of the budget, and someone comes along and says, if you use this arrangement, you can take home X amount more. Yeah. And look, we'll come on to the umbrella compliance and the crackdown and all of that sort of stuff, but let's put that aside for one moment. That's a year away, a year and a half away. Yeah. Let's look at what would now, realistically, how many people are going to say no to more money?
Mate, I'm with you. I think there is, prior to this, even prior to the budget, in my personal opinion, for what I've seen in the last 3 to 6 months, avoidance, evasion models, which in fact I call it evasion because that's what it is. Yeah. It's deliberately evading, is the worst it's ever been, and from what I've seen. And I've been doing this, I had a 3-year sabbatical, but for 17 years. It fucking astounds me just how prominent it is. And it's interesting. I was speaking to Luke, and this was about a year ago, and he did a calculation for me about, we were helping, in fact, someone that you and I spoke about after, but the individual to the promoter was worth 45 grand. Yeah. For us, it was an £80 margin, collective margin. £45,000. Yeah. My fear is that people, and especially, and we'll come on to this, but right, we've got 18 months. It's, you know what, like Rachel Reeves has said that she's not going to rule out putting taxes up even more. So why don't we fucking cream it now for the next 18 months? Like,
and there will be those that will say it, because they'll say, do you know what, I'll have 18 months and I'm out, because this ain't profitable for me anymore. So I might as well make hay while the sun shines. Now, the industry has got to police that. Every bit of the supply chain has got to police that, and right up to the end client. The end client can't, in my eyes, shouldn't just, say not my responsibility, I'm giving it to you guys. Because ultimately, let's look at Criminal Finance Act, failure to prevent offence, failure to prevent tax evasion offence, and you've called it evasion. And I think reality is you can badge it as avoidance these days. I think given court decisions, HMRC action, the general consensus of the industry, I mean the tax profession industry and the legal industry, that it doesn't work. You can't just call something else and it becomes it.
So in other words, stop saying evasion then. So I need to.
No. Okay. What I'm saying is we call it avoidance, or it gets called avoidance because that seems to be, well, look, the message comes, avoidance is legal, evasion is not. It's the old adage of The difference between the two is the width of a prison wall.
Right. Okay.
Right. So let's call it avoidance, and it just feels a little bit more like you're just having one over on the tax man. The reality is it probably more goes to the evasion point at this point, because we know, look, we were calling these loans 20 years ago. We know they're not loans.
Yeah.
So if you call something it isn't, and I'm not necessarily saying that the person who's been caught up in this, I'm not necessarily saying the contractor is committing evasion. There's the promoter is facilitating evasion, but then you have to look at the offence of failure to prevent. So that is the whole supply chain that has a responsibility or has to put procedures in place to prevent the offence of tax evasion.
And let's say they don't. And actually, it'd be, you know what? It'd be great to actually just hear it said out loud, as opposed to lots of certainly people like me and others who've been a bit keyboard warrior. What's the potential consequences then for failure to prevent?
Unlimited fine and jail time.
Oh, there is jail time.
Yeah, jail time. Yeah, it's
So
a
that's how
corporate,
serious it is.
and it's a corporate offence. So the jail time lies at the corporate level. Yeah.
So that's where the end client, it can go.
That's why everyone should have an interest.
So
That's why everyone should have an interest in it, because it's failure to prevent. Okay, look, you can't. I get it. You can't police the whole chain.
Yep.
But you have to police your bit of the chain and ensure that they're policing their bit of the chain, because that's just as important. So if you're an end client and saying, well, look, we've put the procedures in place that we're confident that our agency, but actually the next question to that is, well, how can you be confident your agency has put the procedures in place? A lot of the times you look at this and you go, well, okay, you've put the procedures in place, you've done the training with your staff, you've got all of the policies in place and you're protected. What's your agency doing? Don't know. Well, why don't you know? Well, that's their responsibility. No, that's part of you policing and putting procedures in place. Is one of the procedures you have to put in place is ensure they've got their procedures in place, or you don't use them.
In fact, it's an impossible question to answer, but in our opinion then, how many businesses are genuinely doing that?
So at the big corporate level, at the household, absolutely,
because they've got the resource to be able to do that.
They've got the resource,
the money,
they've got the time, they've got the advisors, they've got all of the reasons and the resources to put that in place. And we have to remember it does only apply to medium and large companies. So you know, there is a cut-off where it is recognised that companies can be too small to put these procedures in place.
Right.
But okay, that's fine. But do we want to be just compliant with the law because that's what the law says, or do we want to go above and beyond and actually put those procedures in place as if you were that company? You've got no legal requirement to, but actually, do you have a moral requirement to? If you want this industry to thrive and your business to thrive, there has to be a level where you go, yes, I don't have to do this, but I want to.
There's two words, or there's a word, morals, and moral, and that's one of the probably the biggest jewels that we've had is deciphering one's opinion on what is moral and what isn't. And certainly for umbrella companies, it's not a coincidence that that's why everything is landscape changing from 2026, is because there are morality issues in there that government have probably seen fit to say, well, you might not think it's morally wrong, but we do.
Well, don't get this wrong. The government has said you've not policed your own industry. You've not kept your house in order. So we're now going to put your house in order. So the natural question to that is, well, if this doesn't work, what happens then?
Do you know what? Like, it's probably a good way to just start with. Mate, I thought
we seem to have glossed over. We've glossed over the budget.
Obviously, look, the employers' NI elements, like, they're relevant.
Yeah,
but I've got to be honest. I think people would be sat here if we spent half an hour talking about that, thinking,
you know, there's bits in the budget that probably we should mention. That there's, if you are a contractor, you've had your own limited company, business asset disposal relief. When you liquidate it, is something that's been pretty useful. 10% up till now. That's going to go up So that's going to go up to 14% next year. It's going to go up to 18% the year after. So if you have got a company that's not used anymore, or you want to liquidate it, now's a good time to do it. That's just good, sensible planning. Capital gains obviously is going up. So quite a lot of, particularly in the IT industry, which I deal with a lot of them will deal in crypto. A lot of them will deal in various other projects, side projects that may have issues around capital gains. Probably time to have a look at that and see whether you want to dispose of that. Business owners. I've seen your car, Rob, so I'm not going to ask you. But how many company directors do you see driving double cab pickups, for instance?
Yeah.
Now there's a reason for that. It's because it's not a car; it's a van. Yeah. So you get 100% capital allowances on it, and you get a lower benefit in kind as a private use on it. Double cab pickups are now going to be classed as a car. So that's quite an impact.
Right, okay. Yeah, that is.
It's quite an impact. So there are things as a business need to be looking at and need to be having a conversation in the budget. But from a contractor's point of view, i.e. someone who is operating under an umbrella, it's not good news.
It wasn't friendly, yeah.
No.
Yeah, look, and I'm not going to politicise this, but it looked like anyone that wasn't part of a union got attacked, or it didn't end well for. I have to be honest. So, damn you, Reeves. Right, okay. Let's read where we all got. You didn't know it was coming, did you?
Didn't know it was coming.
I don't know anyone who did.
We knew it. Okay, look, let's full disclosure. Me and you, Rob, we meet quite regularly with officials at Bays in the employment business. Yeah. And we've been talking quite regularly with them about what umbrella regulation looks like. We've spent quite a long time trying to describe what an umbrella is, but that's probably a whole different conversation. Yeah. So we knew that there was, and there had been the consultation. So, I'm not saying we had the inside track on, we knew something was happening. Of course, people knew it was happening, it was consultation. But the last conversation we had, obviously, was election coming up.
Yep.
And I think no one was surprised which way it was going. And the question was going to be, how quickly could the new government react to that issue? Was it going to be a day one issue, or was it going to be a day 365 issue? So I don't think any of us sat there thinking, and particularly umbrellas don't generally get a mention in the budget anyway.
Ever.
So we weren't sitting there waiting for it and going, well, what's it going to be? Who's got this in the sweepstake? And then they stood up and announced it. So we all quickly searched, as you do when sit down, all the documents are coming up, refresh, and we read it. And I think I'll be honest with you on this. I was in a room of tax advisors, solicitors, experts in this industry, and we all looked at it and went, yeah, I'm not sure what that means, actually.
Yeah, first and foremost, I thought that it would be, so the last, let's call it a rumour, because they can't ever tell us what, so the meetings that we have with various government departments, I thought it was going to be the definition of an umbrella company, because we got told if it's not in the budget, it'll be something very, very quickly after. That completely sort of sideswiped me in thinking what then did happen would happen. Didn't have a clue. I'm not going to lie, I fell off my fucking chair when she said about umbrella companies in the budget. I was like, holy shit, she's actually said it. And it was quick. I think it was in the first...
It was very early.
Yeah, mate, I think it was in the first 5 to 10 minutes. And I was like, wow. So, but then she announced the employment allowance would be doubled. And I was like, oh man, I'd like 3 minutes of euphoria. And now you've just made mini umbrella 100 times more profitable. But I still didn't have any clue of what was going, like you. We were refreshing, and then we saw it and was like, okay, on first reading it, and like you, mate, I phoned you and
very quickly.
Yeah, and you were in the room with the people that you've just mentioned there, and I think there's a lot of us that it's not the most well written or well polished document. That said, I have to be honest. I thought it was absolutely brilliant news. I really did. I thought umbrella company, and I mean umbrella companies that really want to make an impact, want to make a difference, want to improve our industry. We've been in unison in terms of like, finally, I think it got to a point where I know a lot of umbrella companies who didn't watch the budget because it was, well, we never get a mention. They're never going to do anything. And then LinkedIn started getting this.
Who can be the fastest?
Fever pitch of like, oh my God, something's happened. And it sort of brought everyone out of the woodwork. But I've got obviously the document in front of me. I'm not going to bore.
That's cheating, Rob.
Well, I was going to read. Do you know what it was? I was going to read it, and now scrolling down, I've realised no one really wants me to basically read the whole thing. But the premise of it, and jump in and tell me if I'm wrong here, but is that from April 2026, the responsibility is going to shift from the umbrella to either the recruitment agency, or if it is an end client engaging contractors or temporary labour through an umbrella company, that liability is going to shift to them.
We haven't seen the legislation,
Yep.
so that's important to say. So what we're working off is policy and conducts and all of that sort of stuff,
Yep.
right? So we're all kind of interpreting at this point, and I think the next meeting we have with government, we're very interested in put some flesh on this.
Agreed.
But certainly the interpretation I'm running with is, and I'm going to paraphrase this, you can shirk everything as an employment business, but you can't shirk the pay-as-you-earn responsibilities.
Yep.
That remains with you. You can have someone run the payroll for you, but any shortfall, any missing tax
is on you. That's
on you. And that's me boiling down.
Yeah, it almost in a layman terms.
Yeah.
And I think that was where a lot of confusion lies. In fact, in, like you say, it's not defined yet, but in terms of the document that we got sent, and I've lost count how many times I've read it, because there's too much. It's still open to too much interpretation in terms of, well, account for. Does that mean you've got to do it, or does that mean that you've just got us when we have accounted for it because we have a due diligence report that shows that all the PAYE liabilities have been paid by our umbrella company, so thus we have accounted for it.
Yeah. So immediate question, do you now just need the umbrella company to have one pay-as-you-earn scheme, or does the umbrella company, if it's running the payroll, have to have a pay-as-you-earn scheme for each client?
So what you say on an individual by individual basis for the agency?
It's an immediate question that's not answered.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And I think this is where our next meeting, as you say, is going to be like really massive, because whilst I applaud the direction and the fact there's something actionable now, there is still too many uncertainties that I don't think and when I say they, I mean Labour and the government, I'm not even going to say acutely aware of, I'm just going to say are completely unaware of.
Yeah, and I think it's quite common. Look, there's an idea, and look, this isn't a what do you think of this? This is a we are going to do it. They're not asking for opinion. They're not asked, but the practicalities around it, the industry will have to have an input and shape through various, I'm sure there'll be roundtables, I'm sure there'll be the meetings that are going on.
They have said that they're going to communicate with stakeholders.
There'll be some communication. So there's going to be some quite interesting practicalities around it. But this is what I mean by we have a general premise at the moment, how it actually operates in practice. Now, my view, and to get technical, is it will be an amendment to the agency regulations in ITEPA, Income Tax, Employment, Pensions Act.
Oh, that's what you think?
I think it'll be. So it won't. I think it'll be an amendment there to basically say, if you're using an umbrella and we're going to have to define what an umbrella is,
Yeah.
then under these regulations, which is, as it is now, the agency regulation, because don't forget, that's what they're saying. Actually, these agency regulations should have been operated this whole time. Actually, this is the way it should have worked the whole time. But you've shifted your burden to the umbrella by saying they're the de facto employer. So now we're going to adjust that to bring it back, because that's what those regulations were always supposed to do.
Well, it was pretty similar to what they did with the off-payroll reform in terms of hypothetically the same principle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think it will be an adjustment in there that basically is another couple of lines that says, and if you're using an umbrella, then you will have responsibility for the pay as you earn.
So people have said to me, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge? And I'm like, wow, that's quite a question. Because are you talking about the biggest challenge for umbrellas? Are you talking about the biggest challenge for recruitment agencies, the biggest challenge for end clients? But I think actually, when I think of it, it's a mindset. Now, I'm not saying this to deliberately be disruptive, but obviously the document very, very clearly states that the way that we have operated our industry to date, membership bodies, accreditation bodies, in their opinion, has not worked. You've probably got, I find that, look, it hasn't worked. I understand that part. I think it's a bit savage to say that they've never worked. I think the intentions in the beginning as to why membership and accreditation bodies were there were done with the right reasons. I think the problem with that now is that 85% of recruitment agencies, for example, are categorically ingrained in the accreditation membership route. It was the best of nothing else because there wasn't anything else there. It wasn't anything like is coming now. Those liability elements and that PAYE responsibility shift was on us. But how do we now, and I think education in terms of, I think we're at a precipice where if we get this right, I think they'll personally roll this out to a payroll-wide industry. I think that the umbrella industry is the guinea pig for that. HMRC is certainly aware that the same atrocities that have happened in the umbrella industry are also happening in what I'd call the payroll industry, so with payroll bureaus. But how do we educate supply chains now that have, for the best part of, well, since 2008 probably, been that, well, I can take your word for it that everything that I'm doing is fine, to now actually that not being the case, that can potentially put your actual business at risk. What's your opinion on how we can potentially educate the industry on that? I know I've said a lot there, sorry.
No, and there is a lot there. I mean, you've mentioned, accreditation bodies, and look, again, I'd agree with you. I think there's been a lot of good work that's been done, but unfortunately what's happened is the accreditation badge has been seen to be, that's the only due diligence I have to do. Now, if HMRC come knocking on your door and say, by the way, your umbrella hasn't been operating payroll correctly, it's disappeared, you're not going to curry much favour pointing at a badge and going, but look.
And that's and listen, that's the case right now. And that's been the case since they all came into the industry. And again, I'm not being a dick when I say that. It's why we never went down that route, because it didn't give, in my opinion, the security that our supply chains required.
I think what I'm saying, Rob, is, and again, it's not to disparage any efforts whatsoever from any party. The idea is laudable, but what it's allowed is this false sense of security, which means that business owners don't have to fulfill their, it doesn't mean they don't. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean they don't have to fulfill, but they feel they don't have to fulfill their obligations. And they haven't
been as well, I think, is the key.
And that's the education piece. I mentioned earlier the Corporate Criminal Finance Act. We're going to get a new offence in soon under the Transparency Act. Yeah. That's basically the same offence, but for fraud. Now, fraud's quite a wide badge.
Yeah.
it's quite a wide badge. But again, it shows you that the law is looking for transparency. The law is looking for accountability. The law is looking for you to be interested in what others are doing in your supply chain.
Yeah.
Because that's the idea behind the offences. You're preventing others. So the law applies equally to this industry. It's not an industry that is exempt. It's not an industry that somehow magically has, this ability to say, well, because it carries a certain badge, of any badge, any badge. I could create one tomorrow.
Yeah, agreed.
It still wouldn't mean you can't.
And there's and there's bundles of them as well.
It doesn't mean you shirk your responsibilities as a director. And if those responsibilities are too much, then you shouldn't be in business.
Yeah. That's almost made me a bit speak, because it is that blunt. It is that blunt. And I think you're right. I think, I said, I alluded to this earlier. I think there's a rebalance opportunity now that can happen in a really, really good way. Look, as much as I applaud that, is it going to eliminate the bad players? No. There are always going to be those who have the mentality of, I've never been caught, I'll never get caught. Does it, and I guess to a certain degree, does it clean up 75% of it? Well, the Treasury, if it does clean up 75% of it, are going to be a lot happier than they otherwise would be at the moment. I don't think you're going to extinguish that. But I think, do you know what I think? I think we need a collective come together so that we can actually properly educate. And like what you've said, it's, not, and we've, and I know I'm going to be unpopular saying this, but I don't care whether anyone likes me or not, but like there are power struggles that have happened historically. People want to, and bodies want to maintain that grip and that influence. Is that a beneficial approach? Or, us up in a previous podcast, myself and Luke Shannon Little from Bishopsgate were talking, and we were talking about coming together. And actually, I now think, is that a bigger responsibility now than it's ever been? The reality is, will it happen is completely different, but interesting.
I said it earlier. I think the industry should consider itself on notice.
Right.
So, I said it. We wanted you to clean up your house. You didn't.
Yeah.
Now we're going to put something in place. If that can't work, they're not going to say, well, we did our best and forget about it.
We won't get another chance.
There'll be further, and that will make it difficult and more expensive for everyone to operate. So now is the time to say, do you know what? We actually are going to pull together as one, as an industry that is not going to be self-interested, is going to provide absolute transparency, and is going to work for the contractor.
Yep.
Because ultimately, you don't have an industry without contracting.
I've said that since day dot. They put our food in our mouth.
Yeah.
Point blank.
So regardless of what badge or what your view is on any of that sort of stuff, it's now time to come together and say, how do we make this work and kick the bad actors out? There will be bad actors.
Yeah.
There will always be bad actors. And I dare say that even when this regulation come in, someone will come up with some genius idea. And I use genius loosely like everyone does these days, but in this case, I mean idiotic idea that basically they'll come out and they'll say, right, do you know what? We've got a way around this. Now, the bad actors are the ones that will buy into that.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you've got two type of bad actors there, I think. And I'll ask you the question once I define them. You've got the ones that knowingly, this is wrong. This is probably not compliant. This is probably not how HMRC want us to operate. And you'll have the others that are hoodwinked, but possibly hoodwinked because the inducements are enough to sort of not ask too many questions. Now, I'll ask you the question, is either one of those worse than the other? No.
And, I think this is I think there's always opportunity. There's always opportunity. So, when this was announced, I have no doubts that there are people or businesses or I'll call them charlatans, sitting there thinking, right, if we build this, we can exploit this. And actually, I was having a conversation, but Dave Chaplin and I were having some comments on LinkedIn over the past couple of days. And he said, you will get your expert chancers. And I thought it was a great terminology, who will, and we see it with many umbrella schemes. You and I have sat in many meetings in many agencies where they come in, the presentation's glossy, really glossy, really sharp, really polished. They've had KC opinion. Right, well, you've had KC opinion. Trust us. Everything's going to be fine. Yeah. It will be the same principles in exactly the way you've explained it. So, no, there is no difference. No. I think that's, in terms of, that's my biggest fear is, and this is where there's the crossover on education. So, look, for me personally, and we've been beating the audit drum since 2021, alongside you, as you know, you actually audited Orca before anyone else, and we were pleased to do that. So we've been ready for 2026 since 2021. However, what my fear is now is, and we've already seen it with some of these audit companies who've been around and 5 minutes later they're no longer there, is how are we going to protect the small, medium, the bigger and the corporates will have the resource, the expertise. They will understand it. They will have solicitors and the pedigree to be able to look at that and say, right, this is what we're going to do going forward. This is how we protect ourselves. The expert chancers, as Dave Chaplin called them, how many of them are going to come along and actually be able to influence? Look, I think laziness will be a part. I think a lack of understanding and a lack of education will enable those expert chancers to thrive. Money, as you've quite rightly said. But that's where I'm with you in terms of, and I love the way you put it about we're now on notice, is like we should be doing everything to protect the well, I actually think if we do everything, we should be doing, the contractor gets protected anyway. And that for me is the biggest plus of all. But also supply chains, and I think that's the part that I think I have the biggest concerns about, is those chances coming in and saying, in exactly the same way as we've seen with avoidance models, like, we're in the era of audit now. That is exactly what is going to protect your business. Real-time forensic audits. Okay, so how are we educating recruitment agencies and clients, not just on, it's the questions that they need to ask us. They should be asking you. Does the umbrella company, for example, have any responsibility in terms of how that information is being given to an audit company? Well, if they do, that's a fucking red flag. We should have no input. Like, so we're SafeRec, as you know. Mate, we have no involvement. There is a link directly between our payroll software, so that the minute we run a payroll, that goes directly to SafeRec. SafeRec then has that information in real time. Then obviously the due diligence reports, everything like that, get passed to the agency. That's reasonable procedure. That's reasonable care. Obviously, burrowing further down with proof of HMRC tax liabilities being paid already. What happens with those companies that come along and say they do all of that and actually quite simply don't? It's the education piece on that I think concerns me the most, is how do we get as many agencies, end clients or supply chains clued up and expert enough to actually ask those questions and not just be almost glamorized by a really pretty good looking presentation.
I'm going to give a really simple answer to a really complex question there.
Okay.
Expert chancers, you called them.
Yeah, well, I liked it, to be fair. Dave Chaplin,
expert chancers, snake oil salesmen, whatever you want to call them, they're operating in a space that, A, they see vulnerability, because, but what is that vulnerability they see? Because you're talking about not asking the right questions. I don't think that's the vulnerability they see. I think they see an industry that is hell-bent on squeezing every penny. So how they operate is not to come in and go give you a glossy presentation and say, by the way, I charge the same as this umbrella, this umbrella, this umbrella, and I give you the same rebates as this umbrella, this umbrella, this umbrella. That's not how they do it. They come in and they say, you are going to be enriched. Your bottom line is going to go from here to here. Now, how do they do that? That's the simple question. How do you operate in that way that all the others can't operate because it's not financially viable? Now, the only answer has to be something's not being paid somewhere. Can be the only answer. You've got the same pot of money.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where the question starts. Now, if you're willing to turn off at that point because you've heard all you want to hear, your bottom line's going from there to there, then you're exactly what this legislation is targeting.
Yeah,
you're exactly what the industry doesn't need.
Yeah.
If you're willing to question how does that happen, then you're already starting to ask the right questions. The reason it doesn't happen is because something's not being paid somewhere. That's probably tax and national insurance. Generally, right, look, I know there's ways of operating differently, overarching contracts, joint employment models. Put all of that aside for 1 minute. We're talking marginal differences in that. What we're talking here is someone coming along to you and saying, I will give you 4 figures for each person you send this way. I will get you a new kitchen if you send me.
Yeah.
You know.
But I do get that. And look, that's not going to change. I'm talking more about the 75% that do want to do it in the right and will ask that question. So look, there will be an influx of audit products. That's where I'm more focused on it in the beginning. I said earlier, like, you're not going to get rid of everyone from the industry that will take the risk. And I think I used the terminology like, I've never been caught, so I won't get caught. I get that. I think my fear is on those that want to do it the right way. How do we help them ensure that actually they've got the expertise and the knowledge to pick, I say SafeRec because I'm SafeRec, so I use that as an example. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and say about SafeRec. Let's just say there was Rob Sharp auditing that comes along and says it's a cheaper option than SafeRec, again, hypothetically. Now, what I've built and designed does not actually protect you, recruitment agency, against what that 2026 legislation is going to be. Yeah. That's more where my concerns are, is because what I agree with you on as well is, what are they targeting? Vulnerability. Yeah. If you're a 4, 5, 6 person recruitment agency, you are potentially vulnerable because you may not have the expert knowledge that someone in a big corporate blue chip will. Yeah. That's their business that potentially could literally be lost. And that's where I'm like, no fucking way. I do not want other people to come into an industry that is already immensely vulnerable, in large by our own actions, very much take responsibility for that. But I do believe, like you've said, like we're on notice. Last Chance Saloon's maybe a little bit too Armageddon-esque, but I don't think we get many more bites at the cherry if we don't get this right. If the liabilities are there, so it could cost you your business, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So how do we help those businesses that run that very risk? How do we help them make informed, correct decisions? And this is what I was referring to about the mindset for 80% of the industry has been very, very, very different. Does that make sense?
I completely get what you're saying. But again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about knowing your responsibilities, knowing what the law is, knowing what the legislation is, right? Not relying on others to tell you what it is. Because if you're saying that, which I think you're saying, someone could come into the market and say, I'll 100% police your supply chain.
Yeah.
And you can carry this badge, and that will mean that, okay, that's fine. But your responsibility is still to understand what needs to be policed and how are they doing it, and ask the question, how does that happen? with most things, you know, most pitches and sales pitches and those that don't have the actual knowledge and product that they claim to have behind it fall apart pretty quickly.
Yeah. And look, there'll be casualties, and I sort of think that there's an expectation that there'll be casualties. To a certain degree, does there need to be casualties? I think there may be. Tom, I wanted to ask you as well, if you're a recruitment agency that is currently engaged in an avoidance model, what sort of timescales would you be? Now, I know it's dependent on how many, what model it is that you're running. I just think it's funny. Someone said to me the other day, I know someone, they've said, like, I think I alluded to it earlier, on the 5th of April, they'll exit everyone, and then from the 6th of April 2026, everyone will be PAYE. I mean, you may as well write a fucking postcard right to HMRC on that. But for anyone that's listening that is currently engaged in models like that, what sort of timescales could you be looking at to exit those models and start getting your ducks in a row?
The best time to exit the model was the day after you got into it.
Yeah, I know.
The next best time is today. That suggests there's some sort of kind of amnesty. It's almost like the amnesty bin. You know, we'll forgive anyone that deposits here. That's not the case. HMRC are investigating hundreds of these arrangements, and if you're not on the list yet, and if you've not been investigated yet, it's not going to be long before you are, because the resource that they're putting into, they know. I mean, again, we're back to the reasoning behind why this legislation is coming in. It's because it's been rife. It's been almost to the point of ridiculous.
Yep.
How many schemes have popped? And then, go down the list of HMR schemes, and again, I'll be clear. Just if your scheme's not on the list doesn't mean it's okay in HMRC. It just means that HMRC have not put it on the list yet, because whatever they need to do to get on the list hasn't happened. But it describes how the schemes work. Look at it. Most of them are pretty much the same. They create some fictional world that you have to live in for this not to be taxable. If I said to you, Rob, do you know what, Rob? I'm going to pay you minimum wage. I'm going to pay you the rest of the money that's invoiced in your name, we're going to stick that in a pot. That's a bonus pot. And you might be able to access that in 2 or 3 years. But in the meantime, I'll lend you some money against your future bonus. What would be your first question to me?
How much is it going to be?
And your next question?
I don't know. Do you know what I was actually thinking about?
Why don't I just have my money now? It's my money.
Yeah. Okay. Of course.
Why do we need to describe it as? Why do we need to put it in this bonus pot, and then me borrow from it? Just pay me it. So you have to live in a fictional world. You have to live in this world that, oh, brilliant, there's a bonus pot and I could access it, and lucky me. Well, no, you've earned the money. You'll just have it now.
But then I've seen, and you're right, like I needed to ask, and I wanted to ask you that question because it is that rife. You've said it, I've said it's the worst I've seen. I've seen so many comments as well. Saw one yesterday. Umbrellas, you need to speak to your contractors if they're in non-compliant payment models, and you need to get them to move now. And I'm like, have I missed something here? Like, if you know they're in them, why the fuck are you not telling them you shouldn't be in them right now? And look, I get, and I think it's interesting. There's the willingness of, and you guys will see this with the loan charge. There were some that were absolutely duped with the loan charge. There were others that weren't, like, and that actively pursued it, knew what they were getting into. We're on that.
I will say this. Look, I mean, look, it really started to become prevalent around about 2010, 2012. Loan schemes had been about before that, but it was generally in the banking sector, paying bonuses to high salaried banking staff. So when I-35 came in, there was an opportunity seen in the market that we can take that model and apply it to the contractor model. And the sales pitch is, well, do you know what? You can be I-35 compliant and still take home the same money. Now, that's quite enticing. And I would dare say in 2012, no one was looking at Semprametal's decision, the Rangers' decisions that were being challenged by HMRC. Dextra Accessories was another EBT scheme. No one was going, oh, the revenue are challenging these. They were just going, well, actually, IR35 is a pretty scary beast. I think I might get caught. Here's the answer. But that was 20 years ago. Sorry, 15 years ago. Nearly, 15 years ago. So now, with everything we know about the loan charge, with everything we know about people affected, I think it's a lot harder for anyone who's been in contracting for a significant amount of time to say, I'm not aware of these payment models. Now, that's illustrated by the fact that actually the people we're now seeing affected are nurses, social workers, industries that are not higher rate taxpayers looking to mitigate taxes. They're just looking for a way. Why would a nurse or a social worker who pays 20% tax pay 20% in fees willingly to enter into this scheme? They wouldn't. They can only do it if they're duped. They can only do it if they're duped. Not aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
So those, absolutely, 100%. But if you are a higher rate taxpayer or more, and you are not having higher rate tax deducted, something's going on. Something's happening.
Yeah, and you know. I've always thought about this. You know, you get 4 pay slips. You know, okay, there's an argument of, well, you know, and when I talk about higher rate, well, that might be a little rebate. That might be at some point, intellect kicks in where it's like, wouldn't it? I would like to. For me, it posed the question of, now there's a difference in terms of, do I want to ask that question? But mate, I'm going to be sitting there going, well, I've been paid this amount before PAY. Yeah. This isn't what I got paid before. All you've got to do is turn on a telly to know that taxes are going up. Yeah. They're not going down.
Yeah. But what we're doing there, perhaps unwittingly, both of us, is putting the responsibility onto the contractor.
When actually,
do you know what? Actually, if that's where it's got to, then so many parties in that chain have failed.
Agreed. And it's easy to blame it on the individual.
It's easy to blame it on the individual, and it's easy, and look,
and that's what's been happening.
It's your man on the Clapham omnibus. Yeah. You know, oh look, they've avoided tax. Yeah, but actually, there's a long chain of failures there, or enablers.
Enablers is probably
another word.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend that all of this is. Some of it is very, very, very deliberate.
Yeah.
And knowledgeable.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be a dick to contractors, by the way, when I was saying that. It was more just to get a balance.
And no one is, but the contractor is the ecosystem here.
And that's why HMRC have always pursued them.
So as an industry, again, why are they not being wrapped in cotton wool and protected? Because you don't have an industry without them.
And we don't. There's no recruitment agencies, no umbrellas. And I think for the first time, this legislation, as I say, does that. And it insulates, if you do it in the right way, it insulates the supply chain. Obviously, you can help recruitment agencies, contractors that are engaged in any models that, after listening to this, they'll very, very quickly understand that they should no longer be engaged in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, for the last 7 years, we've been dealing with the fallout from this. Look, there's not always easy answers to this.
Yep.
But I think it's a bit like going to the doctor. Look, you don't want to know something's wrong with you, but it's probably better to find out sooner rather than later if there is. So yeah, absolutely. If you're a bit concerned about the way you're being paid, a bit concerned about the method, a bit confused about why you've got 2 pay slips or why one's called something else and you know that's described as that, absolutely give us a call. Always happy to have a no obligation conversation, put you in the picture, and yeah, if at that point, once you're informed, you need help extracting yourself from it, then absolutely we can help with that.
And WTT, in terms of for agencies who are doing everything correctly and PAY, and I know I'm springing this question on you, but I'm assuming you guys have got plans in terms of helping or getting involved in what this will look like.
Yeah, so look, we always look to help shape the market, because we see it from one of the unique things about WTT is we see it from both ends. So our law firm predominantly works with recruiters and umbrellas to ensure compliance, whereas the tax side generally works with the contractors who are affected by it. So we actually see it through the whole supply chain. So we're quite uniquely placed to kind of understand what affects A, impacts B and C, and ultimately E, F, G down the line. So we always look to use that knowledge and inform legislation, policy, that sort of stuff. Now, look, there's lots of people that do that. I'm not saying it's going to sit here and say we're the saviours of the contractor market. That'd be an absolutely ridiculous statement to make. But we have always had the premise of honesty, integrity, transparency, and not just in the way we operate, but in the way that our clients operate and the industry should operate. So like yourself, Rob, and like many people in the industry, and there is a lot of people in the industry, we want to make it a better industry.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, because we're coming to the end now, I think that's actually what we should leave everyone who's listening or has listened and watched this with. It's not Armageddon. You know what? The only people that are shitting themselves are the ones that rightly need to be shitting themselves. Like for us, like we're ready. Our clients have been ready. Like 2026 is business as usual. And this whole, I've saw so many posts or so many other parts on social, umbrellas are dead. No, they're not. No. With the employment bill, with the costs, like umbrella companies have got a pivotal place in the temporary labour market, absolutely factually. And people shouldn't be shitting themselves, because if you do it right, there's nothing to be shitting yourself about. It's just about being prepared, make the right decisions, understand who is in your supply chain. Are they protecting you against what you're being asked to be protected from, or are they providing what you need to be able to provide, proof of liabilities, etc., and you'll be absolutely fine.
I'm going a bit cliche here, but change brings opportunity.
100%.
Now, nothing stays still.
Yep.
If you're looking for a business to operate a business that just ticks, and something like this comes along and it like blows you out the water, probably your days in the market were numbered anyway.
Yeah.
Everyone has to evolve. Everyone has to pivot when necessary. Umbrellas have a role, 100%. It might look a little bit different. You might have to bring some more value add to what you're doing. But if you're willing to do that, then you absolutely have a place. Again, agencies, yes, might be a bit more responsibility, might be a bit more risk. But again, you have an opportunity to change that into a positive and absolutely sell that to your clients and say, this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is how we ensure you are not going to be at risk of any of this, because we work with these people, and they have all of these bits in place. Here's our due diligence. Yeah. It's all an open book. Come on board.
Mate, we're going to put the sexy back in compliance, me and you, aren't we? I don't think those two words, sexy and compliance,
it's
have
never been heard before.
Mate, no,
never.
I was going to say.
Never again.
That's what I was thinking about when you asked me that question, is like, actually, we can make it. Like, it doesn't need to be this. Look, I think for many, they've not cared about it, or it's not even secondary. It's so far down the list. Like, look, to sort of add to what you've said, I think it needs to be at the forefront now. I 100% do. But actually, it's not terrifying. It's not going to end your business. What will end your business is if you don't
not doing it.
Exactly. And you know what? Like, I sit here now and I could talk to you for days and days, mate. I genuinely mean that. But actually, hearing you gives me excitement. Like what you said about change, like you can almost now, like, this is the part where we can educate ourselves. Recruitment agencies, like that's actually adding to skill sets as well. Yeah. Like, let's look at it in a positive and not, again, the media and stuff like that and society is the first thing is negative. There's so many positives here. And the best thing is there is already things in the industry that mean that you can be ready right now.
And the real positive, Rob, is there is still an industry.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I do, we were told in a meeting with one stroke of a pen, the umbrellas could be taken out of the industry in an instant.
Yep. Yeah, so massive point.
Yeah, so there is still an industry. Now that pen's still there. It can still be struck out, but it hasn't been at this moment. So opportunity to absolutely turn it into again, I don't want to be a bit cliche, a force for good.
100%. Oh, mate, do you know, I'm going to leave it there because that's the great way to end it, mate. 100%. And you've got me thinking of all good things now. Tom, listen, man, like I've got the luxury of calling you a friend as well, mate. So I get to be bewildered by your knowledge and your expertise. I genuinely mean it, mate. Like having you on here is one of the highlights of these series. And I want to, from Rob Sharp and Orca Pods, say thank you very much. But from an industry standpoint, I think we've been very lucky to be able to hear what you've had to say today. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it.
No worries. So we're back. Not a bad way to start the second half of the series. So for everyone, as normal, please follow us on YouTube, Spotify and Apple. If you want to leave some comments, good or bad, if you want to hear anything else or give suggestions about discussion points in the future, please leave your comments there. And we'll very much look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us.